Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the story of an entire continent. It's a history that starts tens of thousands of years before the pyramids were even a thought, and it leads all the way to a modern nation that's still grappling with its own complicated beginnings. This is a short history of Australia.
Okay, so here's how we're going to break this down. We'll kick things off with a familiar symbol, the Australian flag. Then we're going to rewind the clock, way back, about 50,000 years, to meet the continent's first peoples. From there, we'll track the arrival of European ships, the birth of a penal colony, and finally, take a look at how modern Australia is facing the ghosts of its past. Let's get into it.
So you might be asking, why start with the flag? Well, because this one piece of fabric actually tells three different stories all at once. It's a tale of geography, of colonial history, and of national ambition, all stitched together.
Just take a look. You'll see three key symbols set against that deep blue background. And each one, it's like a chapter in the nation's story, representing where it came from, how it's all put together, and its own unique place in the world.
And here's that story unpacked. First up, you've got the Union Jack, right there in the corner. That's a pretty clear nod to Australia's origins as a British colony. Then there's that big seven-pointed Commonwealth star. It stands for the 6 states and the territories, all coming together to form one nation. And finally, the Southern Cross. It's a constellation you can only see from the Southern Hemisphere, which really grounds Australia in its own part of the globe. The whole journey is right there in one image.
But here's the thing. That story on the flag, it really only covers the last couple of centuries. To get the full picture, we need to go back much, much further, to a history that wasn't written on fabric, but on the land itself.
Okay, let this number really sink in for a second. 50,000 years. We're not talking about a few centuries here. We're talking about a human presence that goes back so far it just dwarfs most of recorded world history. It's an almost unimaginable length of time.
And that leads us to a really fundamental point. This continent was never an empty land, just waiting to be discovered. Not at all. It was a place with a deep, established human history, home to complex societies that had adapted and thrived for ages, long before the first European ships ever appeared on the horizon.
And that, of course, brings us to the next massive chapter in this story. It begins with the arrival of those very ships from the other side of the planet, an event that would change the continent forever.
You know, it's easy to think of the European discovery as one single event, but this timeline shows it was much more gradual. It really started with Dutch explorers in the 1600s, guys like Willem Janszoon and Abel Tasman. Yep, that's who Tasmania is named for. But the real game changer was in 1770. That's when Captain James Cook sailed into Botany Bay and claimed the entire eastern coast for Britain.
But you see, arrival and exploration quickly turned into settlement. And for the continent's first peoples, the consequences of this next chapter were, well, they were absolutely catastrophic. Now, this is so important to understand. That first British settlement wasn't for farmers or merchants looking for a new life. It was a penal colony, a prison. The day the first fleet landed, January 26th, is now celebrated as Australia Day. But it marks the moment that colony was founded on land that was already home to an estimated 300,000 people from hundreds of different language groups. This statement from our source, it's simple, it's direct, and it cuts right to the fundamental conflict at the very heart of modern Australian history. There was no treaty, no negotiation. It was just a unilateral claim over an already inhabited continent.
And the results were just devastating for the indigenous population. I mean, this list lays out the brutal reality. People were thrown out of their homes, many were killed in violent conflicts, new diseases to which they had zero immunity swept through communities. The environment they relied on was destroyed. The impact was especially horrific in Tasmania, where the Aboriginal population was almost completely wiped out.
So as Australia started to forge its own national identity, on the battlefields of the world wars, a very different kind of struggle was starting back home. A slow, incredibly difficult, and still ongoing reckoning with the consequences of its own founding.
This timeline really shows just how gradual and incomplete that path towards reconciliation has been. For a huge chunk of the 20th century, official policy was all about controlling or assimilating indigenous people. Think about this. It wasn't until the 1960s that they were even officially counted as citizens. That was followed by the first limited land rights in 1972, which sort of paved the way for a major symbolic moment decades later.
And that journey reached a really pivotal moment in 2008 with the national apology delivered by Prime Minister Kevin Rudd. This was a formal nationwide acknowledgement of the pain caused by past government policies, especially to what's known as the stolen generation, Aboriginal children who were forcibly taken from their families to be raised in a European way.
And that kind of leaves us with this final thought. Australia's history isn't just a fixed story of dates and events that happened a long time ago. As we've seen, it's really an ongoing conversation, a process of trying to understand and reevaluate its own foundations. Confronting the painful parts of its history doesn't erase the past, but it absolutely continues to change and shape what the nation is today and what it's going to become tomorrow.